Okay, welcome everyone to AGRC's latest webinar. Today we have a very special topic here for you with three lovely ladies. And the best part of this webinar is, how we actually came to be, because I was at an event probably about a year ago. It was Transform Finance, and they had a bunch of different workshops and different sort of sessions. And I was scrolling through the list, and I said, "Oh, there's a topic, there's a webinar or there's a workshop on women in compliance. This sounds interesting. It's a topic I haven't seen much about in the conference circuit for governance, risk, and compliance. So I thought, okay, let me sit down. Lo and behold, I was sitting next to Nadia, who is one of the speakers today, and Joanna was the person presenting. So that's how this all came to be. This is how we met, and we invited, of course, Nicola, who is a friend of the association, to join us with all of her experience in the compliance and regulatory world to basically present on women in compliance. Let me get some admin issues out of the way before getting started. We are recording this session, so there will be an audio and video recording available to everyone once we wrap up. Also, we will have a transcript that will be available. We'll have a blog post too. That will take us a bit more time to get out there, but you will have that available to you too. If you have any questions for the audience, for the panelists, sorry, as you hear them speak, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or the Q&A. I will work those questions into the discussion, or I will save them for the last 10 minutes or so of the session to cover those. So without further ado, we have four different topics that we're going to be discussing today: equality, culture fit and negotiation, effectiveness and efficiency with new hybrid way of working, and basically mentoring. And we'll also look a little bit at the future. And we have 7 or 8 questions that we're going to try to cover for all of you. So before getting started, I'd like to ask the panelists to please introduce themselves. Nadia, you want to give us a big introduction, a short
Okay.
introduction as to your
Short and
role in
sweet.
compliance? Short and sweet, yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure and privilege to be here today, and it's a very passionate subject for me. So I'm really happy to share my experience today. My name is Nadia Iziani. I've been in the GRC world and industry for the past 13 years. I start at Thomson Reuters. I work for several companies, and I held different roles from product development on a new KYC platform at Swift to business acquisition roles. But during the past 13 years, I always worked very closely with compliance professionals at different levels, senior, junior, member of the board of banks. So it is an industry, I think, that is really pro women, and we will discuss it a bit more during this session. I want to say today I work for a company called Scope Intelligence, where we are actually the majority in the management team. There is 3 women in the management team for 2 men.
Excellent. Thank you, Nadia. Joe?
Hi, everyone. And look, thank you very much for the Association of GRC for having me, and especially you, Matteo, for being the person that came along to my Women in Compliance session and has been so good at interacting since. So I'm Joanna Wands. I'm head of UK and Europe at Asia Verify. Asia Verify is headquartered in Singapore. We specialize in providing data via technology to help businesses verify their counterparts in Asia, including ultimate beneficial owners. And we're headquartered in Singapore. Everybody pretty much was over in that side of the world. I was the first employee outside of Asia. I've worked in reg tech for over about 18 years now. Started off in the city in 2006, and I've been supporting compliance, risk management, AML teams across banking, financial services, and I love the technology side of things. I think it's so exciting to see what's coming into play now, particularly with what we can do with AI and delivery and data science to bring together really, really important pieces. I'm really delighted to share some of my experience. I'm hoping that it will be valuable for those of you on the phone that are maybe starting out in their careers. And thank you very much again for having me here.
Thank you, Joe. Nicola, last but not least.
Thank you. Thanks, Matteo. And yes, I would like to thank AGRC for having me and my fellow panelists, Nadia and Joanna. I'm very honoured to be with you guys here today. So I started out my career, I was a lawyer, and then I moved into the regulator. So I was at the regulator, the financial services regulator, for nearly 10 years at the FCA. And my last role there was chief of staff to the CEO. So I was working a lot with the exco and the board and on a number of different areas, so enforcement, supervision, policy. And then I moved over to Barclays, where I was the head of global head of conduct and SMCR and also risk. And I was there for 9 years now, I think. Well, I was there for 9 years. And then after my second maternity leave, I left and then I moved to Complyport, where am I now? And I'm the head of financial crime and operational resilience. And alongside all of that, my one continuity, I'd say, along with compliance, is diversity, inclusion and quality, where I was the chair at the FCA. I was also the chair at Barclays for 9 years at the global compliance function. I was the chair of the diversity committee and represented Barclays in the corporate responsibility sense as well. And I also carry it on here at my current organisation. So it's something very close to my heart as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicola, for the introduction. Thank you, Nadia and Joanna, too, for the introductions. Let's get started. I mean, I said we have 8 questions here. Let's try to work our way through these. I know this is going to be a very engaging and lively discussion. Hopefully, we'll get some interaction from the audience, too. So, Nicola, to get us started, how has the push for gender equality impacted the role of women in compliance within the financial services sector? What's your experience there?
So I think it's progressed a lot. It's got a lot better from when I first started. I think recent reviews, there's the Hampton Review and the Parker Review, where it's pushing women on boards and women in senior positions. And this is something that the regulator has taken note of. And I know they're due to publish their final rules on diversity, equality, inclusion in the next few weeks, which I know which will enforce even further, and it will actually be in rules that they're going to request for specific gender representation, because I think whereas before they allowed firms more leniency if there wasn't representation on boards or senior management functions, the percentage wise, it was more leniency, but now it's actually going to be the rules that they're going to enforce, and firms that are 251 or more are going to have to actually report on that. So they're going to have to do regulatory reporting. So to that end, if we have, we have it from the regulator, we have it from very, very high up authorities that they want changes to happen. And I think that the more and more that the regulator get behind it and actually enforce this, then I think it will make it easier, because I'm not saying it's a man's world, but there is obviously a higher population of men than there are women in this profession. But in the recent years, I think that with the regulators backing and in basically forcing the hand of some companies to promote women onto boards, promote women into senior management functions, they've really had to look at their organisational charts and their succession plans and also their development of women, which I think is a massive plus for anyone out there in compliance, because there is going to be those succession and that journey that you could possibly jump on board and increase your potential and actually increase your promotions throughout your career.
Excellent. Joe, Nadia, anything to add there in terms of how have things changed, or how has this push basically for gender equality impacted? No?
I do, Joe. Do you want to start?
I would say that I definitely have seen a seismic change in the engagement, and I mean, you can kind of see the forces that came into play. There was global financial crisis. There was a lot of cultural issues, and from there, the Corporate Governance Act really pushed there being diversity. And I think that there was kind of diversity for the sake of diversity. And then there was this understanding that diversity actually produces much better outcomes, because what you have there is those differences of opinion in the room, able to challenge each other and able to create a conversation that isn't just, yes, let's do that. It was more looking at, considering all factors and actually really truly looking at what could go wrong in different scenarios. And I think that that curiosity comes from being in diverse teams. It's looking outside of what your normal world view is, and it's fantastic. We definitely have seen a big shift, I think, in terms of that culture as well, from it being, very much a male-dominated space. A bit of lad culture, I think, has kind of disappeared a bit more with that Me Too movement coming in. And I think that we probably see a much more respectful and professional workplace now than we probably did when I first started out in the city, when much more was about who's going out for drinks and promotions would be offered in the pub, as opposed to a real process of merit and actually promoting people based on what they're able to offer organizations. So I think that that's incredibly positive. I'm sure Nadia probably has a similar experience there.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Joe. For what Joe and Nicola are saying, I'm in complete agreement, but I want to just take a few minutes to talk about what we can do as women ourselves. Externally, we have more chances, the enforcement from the regulator, the Me Too context, everything is actually playing to our favor. But what can we do in our current role, junior or more senior roles, to change how we are perceived in the compliance world? So I just want to say a few words about us and being an active agent to increase diversity and to push the diversity agenda in our role. Do we have the same and equal chances, in the industry? Probably not, but we can actually increase those chances. I think what is really important is one of my previous mentor told me he met so many women that were so good in their job and so talented that it increased his willingness to hire women, but it helped him to kill his unconscious bias of men are more efficient or they work harder. So I think we as active agents can change the perspective of people internally to increase that diversity willingness. And I do believe that regulator help, the political context help, the fact that the media really talk about the subject on a regular basis become let's normalized. But us as active agent, we can change the perception internally. I think it's really important to go beyond your current role. As women, sometimes we fear or we don't feel we have the authorization to go beyond our KPI list, what we have to do in our role. I think understanding how we can positively impact the company and how we can positively change the culture of the company when it comes to equality and diversity is really important. The other thing that worked really well for me, I'm a woman, but I'm also a woman of color, is putting a genderless lenses. When I work, I don't really look at friends and alliances because they are women or because they look like me or because they have a French accent like me. I actually try to really put my lenses in the core competencies of everyone, the core skills, and how I can make a difference, regardless of the gender, regardless of the age or the religion status of my colleague. The other thing that is really important is to seek and find consensus and to be the instigator of new ideas and new projects that are related to pushing that diversity agenda. I am a compliance person. My job is to manage the risk in the company and protect the company, but also my job is to help the team to be more efficient and more effective. To come back to Joanna's point about diversity, it has been proven it creates more effective and efficient teams. I think proving it by doing it is very powerful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Managing upwards is really important, making sure that you engage not only your direct line of management, but other managers within the bank or within the organization you work for is very important. And finally, if you are in a position where you can hire talents, make sure you push that diversity agenda in collaboration with HR. I think it's really key.
Excellent. I mean, it's great to hear that, things have improved and things are moving in the right direction. But of course, there are still challenges that remain.
Mhm.
So, as a follow-up question, I guess Joe can get us started with this one is, what are some of the biggest challenges when faced in achieving equality in compliance roles? And how can these be addressed? I know Nadia has covered, addressing some of these challenges, but I mean, what is your take on this, Joe?
Well, if we look at the shift in terms of salaries and people in management roles, you kind of see this line. It's quite linear between male and women throughout their 20s, throughout their 30s, and then there ends up being this huge gap that comes into place generally from 40s onwards. And if you look at generally what's happening at that point in time, it's quite often when people are going off and they're having families. That still is always going to be something that has to happen. Unfortunately, the men are not in a position to be able to carry the baby at this point in time. But what it does produce is within professional roles, anywhere from 12 to 15% difference in salary, which doesn't then close later. So you've got that seismic shift that goes from salaries being even to then being split and not closing. And for men, it's neutral. Between a man who doesn't have a family and a man who does have a family, there's no difference between women that don't have children and women who do have children. That gap exists. And I think that that's something that probably does still need to be addressed. And we probably saw a bit of a change with what happened with COVID. Yeah, we were all at home. And for those of us that had children there, I mean, I'm glad that mine were not at that stage at school age, but I can only imagine having to homeschool whilst working my job. It was incredibly challenging having at that point in time for me a toddler there and being pregnant. But what you started seeing was male colleagues with their kids in the background. You would end up talking, you would end up understanding a lot more. And I think there was an authentic layer that came into play there where we actually understood what was really important in not only our careers, but our lives. Why are we actually doing this? It's, for, that whole family as a whole. That gap and that flexibility that came in with COVID was very accidental. It's kind of like those big events that end up being that disruptor that changes how something previously was and how it now can be. And I think that businesses did a fabulous job at adapting to that. But we don't want to lose necessarily all the flexibility that came from that, because I think that we proved from a big part that actually hybrid working can work as well as being in an office, and that flexibility needs to be something that maybe comes into the conversation. So you asked whether or not there was a way that we could maybe change that inequality, and I think that some of that has to come with having that initial discussion. So in my current role, I spoke to our founders before I joined Asia Verify, our founders Jenny and Vikul, about what would it mean for me at that point in time, having a 1-year-old child and a 5-year-old to join an organization and do a big role. And I've made it very, very clear that it was going to be incredibly important for me to be able to give everything that I could, not only to the role, but also to without losing what I had with that family balance. And what we did was create a level of flexibility from that offset that was able to allow me to have that coverage with the Asia time zone. So I would get up very early in the morning, have calls with Asia, then get the kids up, then go log back on. And I was able to condense my day into 4 days as opposed to 5, so that I wasn't having to put my 1-year-old son immediately into full-time nursery. So I think that there's ways that it can be done, but it needs that open dialogue, and it needs you to maybe be more creative if you're somebody that's employing a team, of thinking, somebody might not completely fit the mold of how you have always worked, but they might have some fantastic skills to bring to the table. And I'm sure that anybody that has children knows how robust your skill set is afterwards. I mean, negotiation skills, patience, of communication, all these things really improve when you're having to explain what the world is to little people. And I think that these are things that really are great in transferring to business as well.
Thank you, Joe. Nicola or Nadia, any other challenges that you have seen and how to address them? Nicola?
Excuse me. Yes, thank you, Joe. So I would go along the same lines of what Joe's saying. So I remember when I wanted to move and get a big promotion, it was almost impossible for anyone at the next level if they didn't have it before children, to get it once they had children. And that was going from a vice president to a director. I went straight into a director role when I moved there, but I was working with my my team and with the wider function, and I was hearing that people were saying unless they went on maternity leave when they were a director, there was basically no way, or it would take 3 times longer to get it. And that was a big challenge, the promotion side of it, because once they entered into a motherhood, it almost felt like that they felt that they were not pushed aside, but the opportunities weren't there for them. And something I've always said to people that I manage on a mentorship is that you have to be, like Joe saying, you have to be open and honest with the people around you and your network and also your managers, and make people aware, because sometimes I think it's a given where people think that, oh, they've got young children, they won't want a promotion, or they've got the young children, they won't want further responsibility. But it's having that open discussions and being honest and having a plan. It might not be you want a promotion in a year or go for promotion, it might be 2 years, 3 years, but actually setting your targets with your managers rather than shying away. I think it's something that we need to get better at doing as women, because being open and saying, actually, I want to get here in 2 years' time or 3 years' time when my kids have gone to school, or actually when, like Joe said, when they're going into nursery, opening those conversations is something that I think is, a challenge for us personally that we don't do, but it's also a challenge for those around us, whether it be in management or managers, because they might not open the conversation because they might just think that you're out of the game. And that's a challenge in itself, where it's a bias that's given towards women who are coming back. And I would echo what Joe said, that COVID has been monumental for a lot of people, and I know, again, the open discussions like you said that you had, Joe, when you entered your company, I had the same. And it was I live in Hertfordshire, my office is in London, so I was only willing to come in 2 days a week, and that was it. That's what I put on the table. And I think we can't be afraid of having those conversations, because if it doesn't work for you as a family and yourself, then maybe that's not the right company if they don't accept it. So I think having those open and honest conversations can sometimes overcome those challenges.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicola. That's a great segue, I think, to the next question, because we're talking about dialogue and having open discussions with your managers and negotiation to a certain extent. So, I mean, Nadia can touch upon some of these topics in the next question. And basically, the question is, how do women in compliance navigate cultural fit and negotiation within traditionally male-dominated environments? Nadia?
Thank you, Matthew. For me, the number one objective is to be in the right company that has the right culture fit. I think we beat ourselves sometimes because we feel we were not good enough, we were too shy, we didn't grasp the opportunity when it was there, we're not proactive enough. But sometimes it's actually you're not in the right company, and you're not in the right institution that will promote you as a woman. And to come back to Nicola's and Joanna's points, at different stages of your life as a woman, we are the three of us in this call today, we are three working moms with young kids. So you can do it, and you can also be discriminated being a woman with no kids, because the company think that they need to anticipate the fact that maybe at some point you would want to have kids. That could actually slow down your promotion, your opportunity to grow within the company. So the number one objective is to be in the right company with the right culture fit. Just to share a bit of my personal experience, I've been working in beautiful and great institutions with great culture, but I also had few experiences where the culture of the company was not for me. And I think Christine Lagarde, the head of IMF, said that, it's one of her quotes. If you do feel that the company is not the right fit, don't grit your teeth and smile. In face of adversity, go. They don't deserve you, and I think that's really important as well. Once you are in the right company, you can think of negotiating, you can think of growing, and you can think of, because you know your value in the company, what would be your growth plan in that organization. To share a bit of my experience, as I said, I work for big institution, some great. I had few experiences that were not the best. As a woman, talking about my stages as a woman. Today, I work for a company called Scope Intelligence. As I said in my introduction, we have 3 women in the management and 2 men. Our CEO is female. She has 3 kids. Our COO is a woman as well. She has 2 little kids. So it's a very open space for me. I feel very comfortable. I can talk about my kids. I can say at 3 p.m. tomorrow, I need to go and pick up my kids, but I have no issue working a bit later that evening, making sure I finish what I want to finish. So I feel more efficient, I feel more effective, and I actually feel more like free. I feel I can be myself, I can be authentic. So this is the right place to start thinking about growing within an organization. Once you know you are in the right company with the right culture fit, how do you break the glass ceiling? And so many women, I mentor a few more junior ladies in the compliance world, and that come back very often. Like, I feel, Nadia, there is a glass ceiling to break, and I don't know how to do it. From my experience, I went from being a very junior salesperson at Thomson Reuters to being a director in this due diligence company that I work for today. It is really important that we don't refrain ourselves from growing. In a way, we are sometimes our worst enemy. So don't have any insecurity. The imposter syndrome is an issue. If you address it, you can solve that issue. You cannot live with the imposter syndrome for your entire career. So it's important, from my experience, seeking regular feedback internally help with that imposter syndrome. If X number of people are telling you, you're doing a great job, oh, I love what you've done here, your initiative is fantastic, your added value to the risk framework is really making a difference, that really helps you incrementally to change. And if you don't have that, I like this inner confidence, you can build it. So this is, for me, very important. You need to be in the right state of mind. You need to be confident to go and negotiate. The second important aspect is to focus on your core competences, like your core skills, and promote them. We women sometimes don't promote ourselves very well internally. It's really important to promote what you're good at and making sure that you have a positive impact, not just looking at your achievement and your KPI. A lot of men ask for promotion and they haven't achieved their KPIs the previous year, but they do, because they see themselves, they can visualize, they can see themselves in that new role, or they want to have a bigger package, a bigger remuneration. We need to be the same. We need to really grow that attitude. I will repeat myself again, but it's very important to build your internal support network. Not just your line manager, not only the HR or your team members. You need to talk to different people, have your internal support network within the organization is very important. And compliance is about control, it's about risk management, but also ethics and integrity. Those are very well known feminine attributes. We are in an industry that is pro women. So just do it, just go for it. And the last thing I want to say about negotiation, which is a bit controversial, I think we need to adopt the male code for negotiation. And I'm going to describe what it is for me, and it works for me. So, I'm talking from a place of experience. I've been in a position previously where I discover for the same role that my male colleague, when they were having a bigger remuneration package for the exact same role. So I've learned from that. It was a place of disappointment, but actually I learned from it. I never sit at a negotiation table before being very informed. I think it's important to know your market value. It's important to benchmark with external people that are in similar roles. And I think association like AGRC here is very, very valuable. You can connect with other people in a trusted environment, and you can talk about your role. You can talk about your package, your bonus, your KPIs. Do it. try to seek as much information as possible. Present your case with confidence. I mentioned earlier the imposter syndrome. Work on that and make sure that you're confident when you present your case, and what will be the impact that you can bring to this to your role, and how you can grow within the company. I think it's really important to show that you bring something unique to your role. And the last thing I want to say, negotiation is never about what you achieve. It's pretty much more about how you present yourself and how you make sure that what you do today can disappear if you don't get a bigger package, if you don't get more recognition within the institution. So make sure you start that dialogue when you're ready for it.
Thank you, Nadia. There's plenty of strategies there, but I don't know if Nicola, do you have any other sort of strategies that you'd like to mention that have been effective for women in compliance when negotiating for roles, responsibilities, promotions, etc.?
Yeah, so I think that for me personally, and I've always had role models. I've been very lucky to have very strong female role models in every role that I've done. And I've always looked up to, they've been ExCo members, they've been COOs, they've been group compliance officers. And I've learned off of them for the last 20 years. I've always had their strong leadership. And one thing that they've always said to me is that you need to put yourself out there and get yourself known. So even if your manager wants to promote you in large organizations, that sometimes is not going to be enough at the table. You need to have a network of people that is not just your immediate team. So put yourself forward for those, the extra projects. Put yourself forward for whether it's part of working groups, if it's part of strategy meetings, ask for opportunities. I think sometimes that, the imposter syndrome withholds us from asking for opportunities. Can I be on this? Oh, they're doing that in that function. Can I join that? I'll do it in my lunch hour. It's not going to affect my work. Put yourself out there, because the more they know you, the more that you have that chance of, pushing yourself forward. Something that I was taught very early is that you are your own business card. Okay, your face and the way that you act and your gravitas when you walk into the room is your own business card. So let people see that in your company. Let people see how good you are, because that's going to get you pushed forwards and get you onto the development programs, the executive leadership programs, the management programs. That's the things that get you known. Obviously, you have the core of your work, but the other side of it is that let people know who you are, the authentic you as well, because there's no point being someone who you're not. One thing I remember very, very, one of my CEOs said to me, and the reason why he believes he was so successful is because he was his authentic self. And he said, if I had everybody in the room, so my children, my parents, my work colleagues, my friends, all of you, everyone in this company, I wouldn't change. I would be the same person, the same face to every single person in that room. And that said a lot to me, because be the authentic you and you will succeed.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicola. Now, switching gears a little bit, I know it has been mentioned, we have talked a little bit about COVID and sort of the emergence of hybrid work and remote work. And this one's for Joe, but how has the hybrid work model affected the effectiveness and efficiency of women in compliance roles? I know you brought it up a little bit. You want to sort of flesh that out?
I mean, I think it's been incredibly positive in many ways. I think it's amazing what we can all achieve when we're forced into our homes for months on end. But I think one of the big things that ended up changing was, we almost went from having little conversations to having this FaceTime world of Zoom and Teams, and having to really make quite a lot of effort to have those contact points. And as an organization, we've got a fabulous chief operating officer, Elizabeth, who really makes an effort to make sure that we connect as an organization. I mean, we span 7 time zones, and we have people based everywhere. And other than Shanghai and Singapore, everybody else is remote. So we really have to make that effort to be connecting with each other. People talk about trust being built up by having those contact points, and that is true, but there's different ways that those contact points can come across. And one of the things that we really implemented was being able to have almost scheduled time where we could all have a voice, and we make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. There's nobody that dominates that conversation. an opportunity to talk about who they are, what they want, what they're looking for, how they're interacting, what works for them culturally, what more support they could have. We tend to have quite a lot of stand-ups where people from the product team will get together. We'll talk about what we're developing, how we're going to market, how that works. But these little individual pockets that mean that maybe somebody who's a little bit more introverted has an opportunity to speak. Is really important, because I think that's quite often you can be in management meetings and there's one voice that dominates over everybody else, and not everybody gets that voice at the table. And I think in the hybrid world, kind of more so, I think we maybe are a bit more mindful about what that culture ends up looking like and how we end up interacting, because we have to be. We're not mind readers. We have to make sure that people are aware of what we're working on and what we think. And probably to echo some of the points that Nadia and Nicola made, you have to almost quite consciously elevate and make sure that people are aware of some of the pieces that you have done that are over and above. And that doesn't mean, shouting out, oh, I was still online at 10 p.m. last night. It's much more, I had a fabulous conversation with Walmart in California last night. They told me about this instance within our product that is incredibly exciting. There's ways that communication can and should happen that elevate you up as an individual and show what you're capable of. And I think that that's something that is very important that we do, and that we ensure that communication, when you are speaking with colleagues that you're not in the office with all the time, that communication is positive, it's constructive, it's mindful of people's time, and it shows your professionalism and your dedication to your job as well. And I would say probably of the various women that I've worked in management positions, I mean, if I look at our management team now, which is majority women, in male-dominated roles in technology and within senior management, and within even our board of directors is majority women now. They are so accomplished. I mean, the number of qualifications and extra pieces that they do over and above, and the knowledge that they have about their industry is just beyond probably what I would have even slightly seen within our teams. It's so important, but I think that also maybe speaks a little bit to the generation that maybe precedes us, where you had to be so much better than your male peers to get the same level of recognition. So, I mean, there's a lot to learn from women at that next stage up as well, of how well they've managed to break in and break past that glass ceiling just by being incredibly competent.
Thank you, Joe. Just following up on that, with the shift to hybrid working environments, Nadia, I mean, are there any other unique advantages or challenges that women face in the world of compliance? Anything you'd like to highlight?
I agree with the views of Joe on hybrid, and it's great when, again, the condition is to be in a company where it's seen as a great thing, and I think the company that Joe works for embrace it. I have the same experience at Scope Intelligence. We are completely remote, and we love having that hybrid, flexible working environment. So it's something really positive. But generally speaking, what I see, not just in my company, but around me, hybrid working environment empower working moms and also empower women with no family. Because before, if we look at pre-COVID time, to Joe's point, we had a lot of non-related work and social events that were more promoting the man club, let's be honest, than us. And it was not always very inclusive, really depending on the company you work for and depending your level of seniority. But it was quite of a men's club type of culture. Today, it's hybrid. So it's really based on your efficiency, your effectiveness, your results. Sometimes it could be performance driven, to come back to Joe's point, but it could show also a different way of commitment to the company. You can be very loyal to the company. You can be loyal because you're happy in the company and you have a great balance between your personal life and your business life. I see also in those roles that very much about operations, sometimes the middle office role, sometimes the back office role in compliance jobs. You don't do your job less well because you work from home, and that's also an important aspect. There is no excuse, you don't need to be sitting in the open space in the city every day. So I think it really creates a new paradigm, and it allows women to blend their professional and their personal life, which I think is positive. We are not judged anymore on our ability to be sitting on a desk for 12 hours, 12 consecutive hours. I remember the time pre-COVID where you can have a little remark to this woman that needs to go and pick up her kids. Oh, you're leaving already, you're taking your afternoon off, it's only 4. So, that doesn't exist anymore. It's not part of how we are rated as professionals. The
Thank you, Nadia.
challenges,
Yeah,
just a
go
few.
for it.
I don't see a lot of challenges. Maybe just one. I think, and Joe, you mentioned it. You mentioned it. How we interact with colleagues internally. I think you need to make a conscious effort because it's called hybrid. It doesn't mean that you have to spend all your days working from home. It is important to still have connection with more junior, maybe member of the staff. I think you learn a lot from that intergenerational interaction. I know that one of my mentor was an ex-co member in one of the company I work for, and she was so instrumental in my success, and she was so important in my success. I've learned more with her than 5 years at university, I think. So it is important to give that face time to more junior members of the staff, and the more senior you are, the more conscious effort you have to make to help them. So that would be the only challenge I can see for the hybrid environment.
Perfect. Thank you, Nadia. And
My pleasure.
that's a perfect segue to the next question. I know one of the underlying themes here has been mentorship and the importance of having strong mentors or being a strong mentor yourself. So for Joe to get us started with this one is, how important is mentoring for women aspiring to leadership roles in compliance, and what impact does it have on their career progression?
I think mentorship is important to everybody. And if you can take the time to talk about your career progression with somebody who's external but invested in you, then it's incredibly valuable. And of the mentors that I've had, and the majority of them have been men, it's just the way that it has happened.
Mhm.
I think it's very important to have people that understand who you are and the value that you have, so they know your value. But they also can recognize and are comfortable enough to maybe point out your shortcomings and things that you do that, actually, if you were to leave that at the door, you'd be able to progress so much faster because in a way you're kind of holding yourself back by continuing to do something that's counterproductive or doesn't help you, or it's even pointing out if you were able to improve this one piece, you'd excel. And
Mhm.
I mean, I remember having one of my male mentors say to me, which probably fits in quite nicely with the webinar, and definitely when you're speaking, because Joe, you probably speak too much, because communication is a fantastic skill to have, but you have to maybe think considerably about cutting it off a little bit too soon because you're oversharing. It's like, do you know what? Fair enough. And it makes you more considerate because you think, I didn't realize that I was doing that. It's very
Right.
hard for you to see yourself in the same way that someone else sees you.
Mhm. Mhm.
But that same mentor was able to point out some of the best skills that I would have that I would never have attributed to myself. And it's an incredibly positive thing to hear somebody recognize something that you didn't even know you had in you,
Mhm.
and work with you and coach you. And if you hadn't had the opportunity to speak with somebody who is actually an active coach, I definitely have some recommendations which I'm happy to throw out on LinkedIn. But a coach is somebody who can be external to your company and really help you reach that next level or the next level of your goals. And one of the things that mine had said to me was, in 20 years, what did you do in your career over the next 20 years that you were so excited to tell your grandchildren about? It's a really powerful way to start visualizing how have I got to that next step, and it stops seeming that hard because a career is a marathon rather than a sprint. We are all probably in our working life going to be working for 40 plus years. You don't have to immediately have got to director level by the time you're 30 and whatever level. I mean, good for Mark Zuckerberg. It's not for everybody to be running companies so young. You can do different pieces. You can develop your skills. You can develop your soft skills. But I think if you've got that learning mindset and people around you that really support you, you will get to that next level. One of the other things that I probably think about quite a lot is I'm quite good at beating myself up. I think that women, we are quite good at beating ourselves up. You kind of think about what was the bad thing you did rather than the 10 good things you did. So one of the things that I'm trying to work on is, take away that entire view of perfectionism as being what you're aspiring to. It's not necessarily helpful to be a perfectionist in any way because the bar is so high that the likelihood is that in 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, you're going to be disappointed. So look instead at that progress. So make it more from the bottom up. What did you do this time that was better than the last time? What have you managed to achieve in the last year that you are proud of and has made you better at your job? These are the pieces that maybe are a little bit more helpful than trying to set such a high bar. And that's where we feel like imposters.
Nicola or Nadia, anything to add on mentorship?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Joe. I mean, I've had mentors throughout my whole career, and I've also been a mentor from very early on. I also created a reverse mentoring scheme at one of my companies, whereby a lot more junior members of staff mentored the senior members of staff, and that was eye-opening, and it was really groundbreaking because people who were in senior management, they'd sometimes you lose that, what's going on the ground, and it was very eye-opening, and it made people feel that they were more connected to the junior members of staff and they're more connected to their teams by doing it. And I think it's something that, like Jay said, you can get honest feedback from your mentors. This is not your manager who has to be PC and be careful of every single word you're saying. So whether it's, you need to get a haircut, look at the way you dress, look at the way you speak, look at your gravitas, be more, quiet down, or they can actually be really honest with you, and I think that is fundamental when you're trying to progress and get promotions and further yourself, because you need that honest feedback, and sometimes organizations are, they shy away from it. So your mentor is part of that, put that program that was going to help elevate you and push you further.
Perfect. Excellent. We have about 10 minutes left, and I have one question I want to sort of use as closing remarks, and then we'll have a fun question that Joe has suggested that we're going to use, and then we're going to pitch our Women in Whiskey and Compliance session 2, which we'll tell you all about later. But basically, let's look at the future, and maybe Nadia can get us started with this one. But how do you expect the role of women in compliance to evolve moving forward? We can keep it brief because we're tight on
I will
time,
keep
but that'd be
very
great.
brief. I do believe that compliance roles within the corporate world is actually a perfect fit for women. I think it's a great space to grow, maybe to an executive role or to a board role or an exco role. And to come back to Joe's point, we don't need to all be entrepreneur at 20 years old. Like each of us start our marathon at different chapter in our life, and it depends which pace you adopt, you have. But compliance role, I see a great future for women in that role, because compliance is increasingly important, not just for women, but for all of us. It protects our companies. We just had this fantastic event on terrorist group and how terrorist group use our financial institution in the UK and Channel Island to get the money, and to get the transaction going, that cross-border transactions. So it's increasingly important. It's becoming more powerful as well. When we look at financial institution, compliance roles are now part of the board. So I think there's a great future for women growing in compliance roles today to have a voice that goes beyond their operational role, but that really shape the governance and the future of the company.
Thank you, Nadia. Joe, what is your forecast?
I mean, I personally think that compliance is one of the best jobs that anybody can do just for the sheer diversity of what you get to do every day. You know, you can be strategic, you can be tactical, you're communicating with the organization, you're thinking about customers, how they experience, how they interact with your organization. So for the level of diversity and areas that you can work in, it's probably one of the most varied areas that there is within an organization within financial services. So I'm all for that. I think that women are fabulous generalists in many ways. We're great at specializing, but we're so good at doing a lot of different pieces very well. I think that we will continue to see compliance being elevated within the organization. There's already that risk management mindset within the board as being so essential, so important, and that risk piece is flowing into daily compliance interactions. I think that some of the areas where flexibility has been appreciated, hybrid has been appreciated, we just need to keep on making sure that the appreciation for why those pieces are important for women to remain in management positions are understood. I think also making sure, as Nicola was saying, that you keep on putting yourself forward. Just because you don't want to be a director when you've got a 1-year-old child at home and you're not sleeping doesn't mean that you don't want to be a director when you've got a 2-year-old that sleeps through the night. It's making sure that that conversation keeps on happening and that you keep on getting opportunities. I'm a big believer that opportunity is what makes a successful person. Isn't, you know, you can create your own opportunities, but make sure that you put yourself forward for something if it's going to give you that long-term career that you're seeking.
Thank you, Joe. And Nicola?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a great sector to work in. I mean, like I said, I'm a trained lawyer. I moved into regulation and then compliance. It's so varied, and I see a lot of women moving into compliance later on in the career actually, because there's a lot of transferable skills. So there may be people on here that may not be in compliance, and you could transfer. People do. I've seen people transfer in their 30s and their 40s into compliance because, as Joe said, compliance departments are getting bigger because boards are putting more emphasis on it because the regulators putting more emphasis on the board, and therefore, it's growing bigger and more global. And, the outreach of compliance is huge within companies now. And it's not, I think back in the day, it used to be the compliance department was seen as the police. And it was a role that people maybe shy away from. They policed people, but now it's more consultative. It's a lot more. You're an integral part of organisations, and the role is, like Joe said, it's very diverse. So I think it's expanding more and more and more. And because it is, you will see women elevated. You will see more women in senior positions within compliance because that's going to be the organic journey of compliance and the gender equality within the sector.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicola. So I have a final question. This is a fun one. This was suggested by Joe, but I want a book recommendation from each one of you, hopefully by a female author. So Joe, since you suggested this question, I'm going to start with you.
I will give you a female author and a male author. So I'm
Sounds
reading a
good.
book at the moment called The Mountain Is You by Brianna West. Really good book, particularly if you're somebody that, imposter syndrome, or for me, anxiety. I'm the person that wakes up at 3 in the morning and has to write something down in a notebook because I forgot to do it the day before. It's just very good at helping you figure out how to manage your emotions and how to kind of control that internal voice. So that's a big shout out for Brianna West. From more of a compliance and AML perspective, I've got to say one of the best books that I've read this year has been Jeff White's book, Rinsed, which talks about how technology is being used by money laundering and syndicates to basically launder money in the millions and billions en masse. And I mean, it's incredibly eye-opening from a technological perspective, very interesting, but scary. And definitely recommend that if you're somebody that works in anti-money laundering, it's really a must read.
Excellent. Nadia, your recommendation?
I will start with the basis because I think the most important thing is to actually develop your leadership style. Regardless if you're a man or woman, young, very senior, you need to develop your leadership style. And one book that really helped me to do so about 10 years ago when I read it is John Maxwell, The Law of Leadership. It's a classic and it's really nicely written and it's very relevant to compliance professional we have in this webinar today.
Excellent.
Just
Last but not
one.
least, Nicola, a recommendation or
Yeah.
two?
Yes. So when I saw it, so I thought of two. Also, one of them that Joe has just spoke of is of Rinse. It was amazing. I mean, even if you're not in the animal laundering sector, it is a read where you think, oh my gosh. So if you're going on holiday, get it. It's a good read. And one that I always say to my teams, and I've always used in leadership. So like Nadia said, within teams, is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. It's a great book. I mean, every single organisation that I've gone to, I've always said, let's read it as a team. Every management team I've been on, let's read it as a team. And those that haven't read it, they've said, yeah, that's good. It's not a massive read, but it really gives you some really good tips and understanding people that you work with, which hopefully in turn will help you, with your networks, with progression, understanding people. It's a really good read. One of the top of my lists.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you very much, the three of you, for the recommendations. Hopefully, a bunch of us now will go to Amazon and order them. I know Rinse is definitely on my reading list, and it's something that I
Yeah.
have been meaning to read because I'm fascinated by all those sort of journalistic views at financial crime and financial crime prevention. So great, great to hear. It's a good read. With that said, I would like to thank the three of you, Nadia, Joe, and Nicola, for this very
you.
brilliant session and engaging
Thank
and
you.
very informative. I'll get some admin issues out of the way and then say goodbye. To everyone listening in, we have recorded this session, so there will be an audio and video recording available. That should be out by early next week. Also, we'll have a transcript and a blog post, and so stay tuned for those on on our social media channels. I'm sure if you have any questions for any of the three panelists, you can reach out to them on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'd be happy to, engage in further discussion, etc. I know Joe suggested some coaches that she can recommend, so reach out to her if you're looking for a coach. But with that said, once again, on behalf of AGRC, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us, and looking forward to the next one. Oh, by the way, also stay tuned because next AGRC's live event, we will have a whiskey tasting led by Joe. She has she's an expert on the topic, and she's already promised to lend us her services in that regard. So
Fantastic.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Matteo.
Look
Thank you,
forward to it.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
Have a
you
good
everyone.
all.
afternoon.
Bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
afternoon.